My sister took my savings while I was supporting my parents, so I bought her apartment and left her homeless without saying a word. I'm a 27-year-old guy. And ever since I graduated, I've been the one quietly keeping our family afloat. Most days it feels like I live in a constant balancing act, covering my parents' mortgage, paying utility bills, buying groceries, and somehow squeezing in enough for my own rent and car payments. I work long hours at a job that barely leaves me time to breathe, but I don't complain. Growing up, I was always taught that family comes first, and I've tried to live by that. My parents lean on me like it's expected, not special. I know I keep the household running, and I do it because I love them, but sometimes I swear the weight of it seeps into my bones. Then there's Olivia, my younger sister, the golden child of the family. From the moment she turned 16, she somehow had the world convinced she was delicate, talented, and effortlessly deserving of praise. My parents adore her. Every achievement she makes, no matter how small, is celebrated. Meanwhile, my steady reliability is just what's expected. She spends like there's no tomorrow, complains about clothes, trips, and gadgets, and never contributes a dime. I've covered her school fees, lent her money for a new laptop, and let her borrow cash for vacations she never intended to pay back. I tell myself it's fine, that loyalty means patience. But there's a hollow feeling that keeps growing. I catch little comments here and there, Livia tossing them like harmless jokes. You're always so responsible. I guess someone has to have cash while the rest of us have fun? Smirk a roll of her eyes, and I brush it off. Yet sometimes those words sting more than I'd admit, leaving a quiet ache I can't shake. Then, last week, while double-checking my bank account for the 100th time, I noticed a small gap, just a few $100s missing. I stared at the numbers, rubbed my eyes, and thought it was probably a mistake. But deep down, a tiny nagging doubt began to crawl in. I've always tried to see the best in people, especially my family, so when I noticed the missing money, I didn't immediately jump to conclusions. I went about my week as usual, paying bills, checking up on parents, and juggling shifts at work. But there was a quiet unease that followed me everywhere, like a shadow I couldn't shake. Olivia, as usual, acted completely normal. She would gush about her latest shopping spree or some expensive gadget she needed, all while laughing with our parents about how responsible I supposedly was. I tried to smile along, nodding, hiding the knot tightening in my chest. It's infuriating how easily she can flaunt her life, knowing that I've been footing the bills that make her luxuries possible. One evening, she leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling on her phone, and said, "You always have money for boring stuff like bills, but never for fun. I don't know how you survive." I froze mid-sip of my coffee, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. There was a smugness in her tone, a hint that maybe she knew more than I wanted to believe. I forced a laugh, muttering, "Someone has to keep things running, I guess." Even my parents seemed blind to it, praising her for being clever or talented, while my quiet sacrifices went unmentioned. It's exhausting, being the invisible backbone of a family that only celebrates drama and flair. I started paying closer attention to transactions, making notes in the back of my mind of anything suspicious. It wasn't paranoia, just wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone on the living room couch, staring at my laptop screen. My savings account had a few more withdrawals I didn't recognize. Each number tightened the pit in my stomach, making it impossible to ignore. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through them. For the first time, I felt a flicker of anger I hadn't allowed myself before. Something wasn't right. And I had a feeling, deep down, that the person behind it wasn't a stranger. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I spent that entire Saturday morning cross-referencing every withdrawal in my bank account. Each transaction felt like a punch to the gut, small amounts at first, almost unnoticeable, but gradually larger, deliberate, and frequent. My stomach twisted as I realized this wasn't a series of mistakes. Someone had been siphoning money for months. My heart sank when I recognized the pattern. All the withdrawals happened right after Olivia mentioned needing cash for urgent things or unexpected bills. It was her. I wanted to scream, but the quiet house swallowed my thoughts. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, running my hands through my hair, thinking about all the times I'd covered her expensive whims. The new phone she bragged about, the weekend trip with friends, the designer jacket she had to have, all funded by me without ever asking for repayment. The betrayal stung far deeper than money. This was trust, responsibility, and family loyalty weaponized against me. Later that afternoon, I confronted my parents cautiously, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, did you notice anything strange in my account?" "Some money's missing?" I asked, sliding my laptop toward them. My mom glanced briefly and said, "Oh, it's probably a banking error. Don't worry about it." Dad shrugged. "You probably forgot a few bills, son. You're always juggling so much." Their dismissal hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just Olivia. They weren't even willing to see the truth. I left the room feeling hollow. The kind of emptiness that makes your chest ache and your mind spin. I started questioning everything, every late-night call, every borrowed favor, every smile that seemed just a little too smug. The thought that Olivia had been playing me this entire time, quietly draining my account while I kept the household afloat, left a bitter taste in my mouth. That night, as I lay in bed scrolling my statements one last time, I noticed something even more chilling. A withdrawal that wasn't just money, but my sense of control. Whoever was doing this had no fear. And for the first time, I realized I couldn't ignore it any longer. I decided I had to confront Olivia directly. I couldn't keep tiptoeing around this, pretending the nagging doubts weren't gnawing at me. One evening after work, I found her sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone with that same smug expression she always wore. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Olivia, can we talk about the money I've been noticing missing from my account?" She looked up, feigning surprise, her smile saccharine and innocent. "What are you talking about? Missing money? That's ridiculous." My hands clenched at my sides. Don T played dumb. "I've been tracking transactions. Some of these withdrawals. They're way too precise to be mistakes." Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and she laughed lightly. "Oh, come on. You're always so paranoid. Maybe you spent it and forgot. You do have a habit of overthinking everything." I felt my chest tighten, that familiar burn of frustration mingled with disbelief. My parents had overheard part of the conversation, and predictably, they sided with her. "Don't accuse your sister without proof," my mom said, her voice sharp. "You're just imagining things again." I wanted to shout, to demand acknowledgement, but something in me froze. They weren't seeing it. They wouldn't see it. Olivia smirked, resting her chin on her hand like she owned the room. "See, even Mom knows you're just being dramatic," she said, flicking her hair casually. The arrogance in her tone made my blood boil, and yet I had to remain calm. Later in my room, I replayed the confrontation over and over. Their denial, her casual manipulation, the way my parents refused to look at reality, it was suffocating. I felt completely alone, the weight of responsibility pressing down on me while my sister laughed her way through life at my expense. By the end of the night, I realized something terrifying. If I wanted justice, if I wanted her to face consequences, I couldn't rely on anyone else. I was on my own, and for the first time, a flicker of determination sparked inside me, a quiet, simmering plan forming beneath the anger. I started digging, quietly, obsessively, like a detective obsessed with one lead. I pulled up every bank statement from the past year, cross-referencing dates with Olivia's urgent expenses. That's when it hit me, the shocking, undeniable truth. She hadn't just borrowed money once or twice. She'd been systematically siphoning hundreds, sometimes thousands, using little lies, fabricated needs, and even forging my signature on small transfers. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe I had been blind this whole time, thinking she was just careless or spoiled. The realization made my blood run cold. Every little favor I'd done for her, every time I covered her whims or lent her cash without question, had been a setup. She'd been exploiting my sense of responsibility, my loyalty, my patience. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. It was malicious, and it was calculated. I felt sick, betrayed by my own blood, by the one person I should have been able to trust the most. I confronted her again, this time armed with proof. "Olivia, I know exactly what you've been doing," I said, my voice shaking. I slid the bank statements across the table. Her face changed for a fraction of a second, a flicker of guilt or maybe fear before it hardened into defiance. "You're overreacting." "This is insane," she said, but there was no denying the numbers. I could see it in her eyes. She knew she was caught. The worst part? When I tried to talk to Mom and Dad, they still refused to acknowledge it fully. My mom sighed, brushing it off. "Well, maybe you should have been more careful with your money. Olivia wouldn't do something like this on purpose." I stared at her, stunned, my anger mixing with despair. It wasn't just Olivia who had betrayed me. My parents had too. Sitting in my room that night, staring at the glaring numbers on my laptop, felt an unfamiliar mix of rage and clarity. I realized I wasn't just a victim, I was alone, and I had to take matters into my own hands. The thought was terrifying, but it also sparked something darkly satisfying. Maybe it was time she felt what it was like to lose everything. That night, I hit rock bottom. I sat alone in my tiny bedroom, the glow of my laptop illuminating the devastation of my bank statements. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every little manipulation played over in my mind like a cruel montage. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't stop thinking about how blind I had been, not just to Olivia's greed, but to my parents' complicity. The weight of betrayal was suffocating, a tight band around my chest that made it hard to breathe. I felt utterly powerless, like everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, had been stolen from me. I thought about all the times I had stayed late at work to cover bills, the sacrifices I'd made to keep our family afloat, and the blind trust I had placed in my own sister. It was humiliating realizing that while I scrimped and saved, Olivia had been living extravagantly off my efforts, and my parents had turned a blind eye. I wanted to yell, to scream, to throw something against the wall, but the anger only made me feel smaller. It was like being trapped in my own body, powerless while someone else's treachery thrived. I went into the kitchen, hoping maybe some air or movement would clear my head. Olivia was there, chatting on her phone, laughing about some weekend getaway she had planned. The sight of her, carefree and oblivious, pushed me further into despair. "She's living my life better than I ever could," I muttered under my breath, my voice shaking. My hands were trembling as I gripped the counter. For hours, I just sat there, staring at the wall, replaying every betrayal. Every dismissive glance from my parents, every casual lie from Olivia. My mind was spinning with hopelessness. I felt like I'd failed at everything, at family, at trust, at being a responsible adult. And yet, deep down, buried under the despair, a tiny spark flickered a thought that maybe, just maybe, I could turn this around. Maybe I could take control, silently, smartly, without giving Olivia the satisfaction of seeing my pain. The plan was just a whisper in my mind, but it was enough to keep me awake all night, heart racing. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Olivia keep stealing from me, and I wasn't going to beg my parents for justice. If anyone was going to fix this, it had to be me. I started quietly planning, researching ways to leverage my finances and turn the tables. I opened spreadsheets, noted every asset, and looked into real estate and legal tools I could use. Every detail mattered, the timing, the loopholes, the smallest edge I could gain. I wanted to hit her where it would hurt the most, without ever needing to yell or cry or beg. I observed her carefully over the next few weeks, noting every expense, every brag, every careless slip of confidence. Olivia was arrogant, completely unaware of the storm quietly brewing behind my calm exterior. She would casually mention the upgrades she'd made to her apartment, the surprise shopping trips she funded with my money, and the expensive dinner parties she treated herself to. I took notes, calculated, and waited. It wasn't about revenge in a childish sense. It was about justice. It's about showing her and my parents that I wasn't to be taken for granted. I also started putting aside extra money, under a separate account she had no access to. The kind of savings that could allow me to make a bold move later. The more I planned, the more control I felt returning to me. There was a strange satisfaction in quietly preparing, in knowing she had no idea that I was already several steps ahead. Every time she laughed about her freedom or bragged about a new purchase, I reminded myself to stay calm, patient, and methodical. Late at night, I would sit in the living room, laptop open, coffee in hand, imagining the moment she finally realized she wasn't untouchable. I didn't need to confront her, didn't need to beg or argue. I just needed to wait until the plan was perfect. And the more I waited, the more I realized she was about to get exactly what she deserved. Over the next few weeks, I started seeing small wins, though Olivia didn't notice a thing. I quietly shifted some of my investments, tightened control over accounts she had access to, and monitored her spending patterns. Every indulgence she made, every careless swipe of her card, every brag about some new purchase, it only gave me more leverage. I felt a sense of calm satisfaction, knowing the power was slowly shifting back to me. I wasn't doing anything flashy. I was being patient, calculating, letting her arrogance be her own undoing. Olivia's arrogance was astounding. One afternoon, she casually dropped by the living room with a shopping bag in each hand, grinning. "Guess who got the limited edition sneakers?" And the bag. "Oh, and Mom, Dad, check out this dress," she said, tossing items onto the coffee table like trophies. I forced a smile, pretending to admire the haul, while inside, my chest tightened with suppressed anger. Every laugh, every boast, every casual look-at-me moment reminded me why I was doing this. My parents continued to praise her, never noticing my quiet manipulation of the finances. It was infuriating to see them blind to reality, yet part of me relished it. They had favored her for so long, and now I had them unknowingly playing into my hands. Each move I made, each careful adjustment, strengthened the foundation for the next phase. I started documenting everything, every expense, every pattern, every boast. Olivia's confidence blinded her to the fact that her freedom was built on borrowed time. The more reckless she became, the more I realized that the moment of reckoning was approaching. By the end of one long day, I leaned back in my chair sipping a cup of coffee and watched Olivia excitedly plan her next getaway. Completely unaware that the ground beneath her was shifting, a quiet thrill ran through me soon. She would learn exactly what it feels like to lose control, and I would be ready, calm, and composed when it finally happened. The day finally came when I could make the move. I had spent months quietly preparing, studying legal loopholes, saving, and timing everything perfectly. I executed the plan with absolute precision, anonymously purchasing Olivia's apartment in my name. Using a combination of my savings, legal maneuvers, and leverage she never saw coming. When the official notice arrived in her mailbox, she stared at it like the world had stopped spinning. I almost laughed out loud, but I forced myself to stay calm, savoring the moment quietly. She wasn't just shocked. She was blindsided. "Wait, this can't be real," she stammered, clutching the papers as if they were a lifeline. I don't understand. This isn't possible." I stood across from her, leaning against the doorway, voice steady. "It is possible. You've been living off my money for years. You've been careless and arrogant, and now this is the consequence." Her face twisted between panic and disbelief, her usual confidence crumbling in real time. I didn't have to shout, didn't have to argue. The law, the numbers, my careful planning spoke for themselves. My parents eventually saw the notice too, and their faces turned pale. I could feel the tension in the room like electricity. For the first time, they realized that their blind favoritism and refusal to acknowledge my sacrifices had real consequences. Olivia fumbled for words, pleading, bargaining, but I didn't respond. I stayed silent. Watching her unravel without a single word from me was more satisfying than any confrontation could have been. Later that night, I sat alone, reflecting on the events of the day. There was no gloating, just a deep sense of relief and quiet triumph. After years of betrayal, manipulation, and being undervalued, I finally had control again. I had done it silently, strategically, without letting her see the pain I had felt for years. And as I closed my laptop, I realized something profound. Revenge doesn't need to be loud to be devastating. It just needs to be precise, calculated, and inevitable. The next morning, the house was tense in a way I'd never experienced before. Olivia had barely slept, pacing the living room. Her phone clutched in her hand as she muttered over and over, "This isn't real. This can't be happening." My parents hovered nearby, faces pale, clearly stunned. For the first time, they were witnessing the consequences of their favoritism and blind trust in her. The tables had turned. Olivia's desperation was palpable. She tried to negotiate, her voice rising in panic. "You can't do this. That apartment is mine. I live there." I held up a hand, cutting her off silently. I didn't need to speak. Every official notice, every legal document, every carefully executed step was proof enough. The power was mine now, and she had no recourse. Watching her crumble was surreal. The arrogance she carried for years, the smug remarks, the casual disregard for my sacrifices all evaporated in an instant. Even my parents, who had always brushed off my warnings, looked like they were seeing the truth for the first time. The same house that had been her playground of privilege now felt like a cage she couldn't escape. She tried pleading, tried bargaining, even crying, but I stayed calm. There was no shouting, no accusations, just quiet, undeniable justice. The realization slowly dawned on her: the money she had stolen, the lies she had told, the disregard for family loyalty, it all led her here. Homeless, helpless, and exposed. Later, I watched her leave with her belongings, her head down, dignity shattered. I felt a mix of satisfaction and strange relief. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible, powerless, or taken for granted. My parents, still shocked, gave me looks that I had never seen before: respect, or maybe fear, but respect nonetheless. As I sat alone in the quiet house, I realized something important. Justice doesn't need drama. It doesn't need yelling or anger. Sometimes it's enough to let actions speak louder than words. And in that silence, I finally felt a weight lift off my shoulders. After Olivia left, the house felt eerily quiet. No laughter, no phone calls, bragging about her latest splurge, no smug little comments. Just silent sand. For the first time in years, it was mine. I sat in the living room, sipping coffee, and realized how much control I had reclaimed. Not through yelling or confrontation, but through careful planning and patience. It was almost intoxicating. My parents were hesitant at first, tiptoeing around the situation like they didn't know how to react. I could see it in their eyes, the realization that their golden child wasn't untouchable, that their favoritism had consequences. They didn't say much, but every glance, every pause in conversation carried weight. For the first time, they seemed to notice me, not just as the responsible one, but as someone capable, decisive, and in control. I didn't need to speak to Olivia to make my point. Watching her unravel had been more powerful than any argument or confrontation ever could have been. Sometimes silence is the loudest form of communication, and this time it said everything. I reflected on years of being taken for granted, of sacrificing my own happiness, of being the invisible backbone of a family that didn't appreciate me. All of it had led me here, to a place of quiet victory. That night, I walked through the house, noticing little things I had always overlooked: the soft hum of the fridge, the way sunlight fell across the hardwood floors, the stillness that now belonged to me. It was peaceful, but there was also empowerment in it. I felt strong, grounded, and finally respected. Not by shouting or pleading, but by proving, silently, that I would no longer be underestimated. I realized something crucial. Justice isn't always loud, and revenge doesn't have to be bitter. Sometimes it's quiet, precise, and leaves a permanent mark. And in that quiet, I finally felt a sense of satisfaction, a sense of closure, and a strange, freeing peace. Weeks later, the dust had settled. Life finally felt like it belonged to me. Olivia was gone, homeless for the first time in her life, forced to confront the consequences of every lie, every stolen dollar, every smug comment she had thrown my way over the years. My parents had slowly begun to adjust, finally realizing that blind favoritism comes at a cost. I didn't gloat, I didn't rub it in, but I could feel the shift in how they looked at Mia, mix of respect, caution, an acknowledgement that I was no longer invisible. I walked through the apartment she had once claimed as hers, now empty and quiet, and it struck me how empowering it felt. I had executed the plan flawlessly, without anger clouding my decisions, without drama or yelling. Every move was precise, calculated, and undeniable. I didn't just take back what was mine, reclaimed my dignity, my sense of justice, and my control. It was silent, clean, and ultimately satisfying. Reflecting on everything, I realized how much I had grown. For years, I had allowed myself to be exploited, undervalued, and taken for granted. I had sacrificed sleep, comfort, and personal happiness for people who didn't appreciate it. But through patience, planning, and careful observation, I turned betrayal into empowerment. The lesson was clear. Sometimes, the most powerful way to fight back isn't with anger, it's with strategy. I also thought about Olivia and the life she had built on my back. She would have to start over, face real consequences, and maybe for the first time, understand the weight of her actions. That was enough for me. I didn't need revenge to be loud or messy. Its quiet inevitability was far more satisfying. Sitting alone that evening, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. My family dynamic had shifted, my dignity restored, and my sense of self strengthened. I whispered to myself, almost like a promise. Sacrifice is noble, but self-respect is priceless. And for the first time, I truly believed it.